Hey everyone, it's Roger here and Nathan from AI Kingdom, and we've just got another episode that we're going to talk about the new ChatGPT API and the potential possibilities, some of the things we've been exploring and working on, and we'll just have a general chat about the future of chat assistants and perhaps how this could benefit and be productive to society. Nathan, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, thanks for the intro. Yeah, excited to be back for another week. So this week we're going to do a deeper dive into the chat endpoint of OpenAI's API and see how it can be used. We'll also talk about how that's maybe just one of the steps and moving forwards how other context can be injected into the chat in order to drive different applications. We're also going to explore some avenues for actually using the chat in a real world scenario. So, like, how can we package it up as an app? How can we use it as a personal tool, a personal assistant, and some things like that? And we'll be doing a bit of a live explore of these solutions, discussing back and forwards of what Roger and I have both learned during the week, sharing our knowledge with each other and hopefully with you. So, hope
Yeah,
you enjoy.
cool.
Comment down below if you've got other cool tools or other interesting projects that you want us to know about, and we'll go and explore those as well. Very keen to hear about any open source efforts or even commercial products that are doing a good job at this. We're currently in the process of building out a startup that is focused on some of this technology. And so, hence the motivation to do a deeper dive into it. And in the coming weeks, we'll cover some of the topics that we'll eventually be building into the startup that we are kicking off. Yeah.
Yeah, great. So I thought perhaps it'd be good to kick off with a quick little discussion about the Chat GPT API, and it's called the Chat Completion Endpoint. And you can essentially go to the OpenAI website and see exactly what this is all about. But essentially, it's the Chat GPT, the model that they've created with Chat GPT, which we've always known is a slightly better model than the GPT Da Vinci model that has been provided by the OpenAI API for a while. And this one's called, instead of the previous model on OpenAI was Text Da Vinci 3, which a lot of people have been using for content generation, writing blogs and doing video scripts and all those types of things. And there were ways you could hack it in a way that enabled you to treat it like a chat assistant. And Nathan and I both tried that process where you can basically have a Q&A and it continues the conversation with you. Whereas the GPT 3.5 Turbo API, which is essentially the same API that you use with the Chat GPT interface, handles a lot of that chat style conversational dialogue for you, which is really great. They've also reduced the cost by 90%, which is incredible because it was already pretty ridiculously cheap to use in terms of the Da Vinci 3 model. So basically, you can now add a AI chat assistant or engine to any number of applications. And so this is going to probably revolutionize a lot of things because you can, in a way, train it and teach it to respond in a manner that's congruent to the audience of perhaps your application or something like that. So you could teach it to be a financial coach. You could teach it to be a grade school teacher. You could teach it to talk like and use the language like whatever the target audience is. You just have to give it that persona when you first build the system. And there's an example of that below. The other great thing about it is you can pretty well rapidly build smart projects now. So not only have you got people rushing to incorporate this kind of assistance for customer service in their existing applications, for perhaps guiding leads or potential leads through the lead nurturing process on live on their website. You could potentially use this for another use case that Nathan and I were discussing earlier today was for what are they called NPCs in games, giving them essentially a mind for them to talk to. And it's just rather than the app being so heavy and having the model, just calling this a third party API or this API, or you could wrap your own API around this API. You can literally just suddenly turn NPCs into this fairly intelligent and a human that you can ask to do things potentially within the game. So that's cool. So there's, yeah, any number of options. So I didn't want to bore you with just talk about this stuff. So you can go and look at the documents, but Essentially, when you create a chat completion object in your code, in this example is Python, you define the roles. So there's the user roles, there's the assistant role, and then there's the system role. And the system role is where you define the persona or the avatar that you want the chat assistant to respond as. So in the example in the docs, it says you are a helpful assistant. So it knows straight away you're an assistant. And then the user might ask, who won the World Series in 2020? Then the assistant responds with exactly who it is, and then where was it played? And there's this ongoing dialogue that could happen. You can even tweak the system prompt in such a way where you can get also the behavior of the bot. So the bot might actually, instead of just being a passive assistant waiting for you to ask a question like the current chat GPT is, you could actually get it to start interacting with you, set reminders, take action at different time points. We're still researching that and practicing that ourselves, but we do know that there's capabilities there for it to do that. Yeah, and then it just gives you an example response. So if you gave it this kind of message and this conversation, it has this memory of this conversation, and then this is the kind of response you get for that last question is where was it played? And then the response is under choices, message, content. The 2020 World Series was played in Arlington, Texas, which was the new home stadium of Texas Rangers. So that's quite cool. And so the goal is over time, you're having this conversation with this message bot and it potentially building up context. So you're continually increasing the size of this conversation that's going on, and it's having context of the conversation you have with its answers and your responses. There's limitations to that. I think there's a maximum limitation of 4,096 tokens. And that's where you have to look at embeddings and truncating larger bits of text into smaller summaries and all kinds of more complicated stuff, which we haven't got a lot of experience in yet, but we're discovering it and we will have to implement those in some of the projects where
So
we're exploring.
I've just set up like an example using the one of the things you were talking about then. So you will be a financial coach here. And so whilst we can do it through the API, what amazes me is that there's been so much buzz about this because I really don't see it as anything terribly innovative, other than they've added a new user interface, which I guess is what makes it so. That's what really grabs the attention of the community is when there's a new user interface that makes it
Mm,
more accessible. The technology is there, and like in OpenAI's own words, they only really built ChatGPT as a proof of concept app
mm,
that they were hoping other people would use. And so this is an extension into that. Now, so they have the API that you can do, and essentially you can pass in a system parameter and a bunch of messages. And so you'll see that here. You can pass in a bunch of messages, like a system, and then a bunch of messages. And so all I've done here is recreate this same experience here. And I'm testing this live with you guys so we can see how it works. But I've put in the same message to start. Can you tell me a bit about your current financial situation? Are you employed? Do you have any debt? What are your financial goals? And just to show that you could do this previously with the old user interface, I did the same thing and I set it up here. And we did this in a previous episode. And I just put in here system, you will be a financial coach. I put in these couple of lines so that it knows that it's a conversational style of interaction. And once it knows that, it will just follow that pattern because that's what the GPT models do is they just follow the same kind of patterns. Now, using these injection of the start and end text and the stop sequence here, now I can use this in much the same way. So in this one, it's asked me what is my income? So I'm going to say 1,000 expenses. I don't know, 20,000. Very tight, and I have $0 in the bank. See what happens. So it looks like you have good income, but no savings. What are your financial goals? To buy a house. All right. So we can continue on like this, and it's going to continue to walk through that. And so this is what we did. Super, super contrived example.
yeah, but it's essentially the same thing. I guess the other added benefit is this model is apparently slightly better. It's a bit faster, it's highly optimized.
I think the cost must be a lot less for the chatbot as well, right?
Yeah.
I'm employed as a software engineer. Do you have any debt? Say 20,000 on credit cards. And what are your financial goals to buy Anyhow, so let's see how this one responds. So if you hold down control and enter, I actually find this one is way more wordy.
Yeah. What was your maximum token length in your in the previous window?
256.
Yeah, okay, both same. Yeah,
Yeah.
much more verbose.
I don't know. What we can do is we can delete that and we can submit it again. I always find that it's really, really wordy. So it's like they're injecting some other context into, they're not just doing a direct translation. So what I've found is,
He is like that though.
yeah, yeah, your limit your responses to 2 sentences. 2 sentences. If you talk for any more than 2 sentences when you're having a conversation with someone, you're hogging all the attention, aren't you?
Yeah.
So I've been going through like this and iteratively redefining the policy. So for me, I've been making a bot that will help me manage tasks and as a personal assistant, if you like. I meet with a coach once a week, but every day I have to put into practice what we go over in these coaching sessions. And that means like morning routine. What tasks am I doing today? Prioritizing things through the day as I'm doing tasks. And when I'm switching contexts, what is most important? Keeping track of random tasks that come up. And at the end of the day, evaluating how I went on what I'd planned for the day. And of course, the daily planning is all in context of a larger objective, which would be what I'm planning to do this week, which is in service of a larger goal still, which is what I'm planning to do this month, and so on. And you
Mm,
can start 3 years out and then work your way back. Then you know that everything you're working towards today is going to contribute towards that final goal, which for me, I don't really work that way naturally. I would like to work asynchronously based on what comes up. That doesn't really get you in the direction that you want to go in the long term. I tried this approach since we're building a SaaS startup. I asked ChatGPT in a separate context. I said, "Who are the best business coaches as for software as a service and what would we say AI in the world? Who are the best coaches for AI as for in the code?" So I want 3 names. Who are the best 3? So this will give us a couple of names here. So I would say then it's given me these 3 names. And so what I really want the bot to do is I want it to take on the style and the attributes of these particular experts. And so I want to know what their particular styles and traits are. Can you describe in detail their coaching and personality style along with their process? So let's see if it just does it for each. And so what we're doing here is we're generating in machine speak, we're generating like a vector so that the GPT model knows where to start from. And so we've got this rather large kind of description. And so we will take this and we will put this in our playground here. And so instead of being a financial coach, we'll say now you are a business coach. You are a as a service, yeah, business coach that specializes in software as a service and AI startups. You will take on the attributes of the following and assist your client AI kingdom. We'll just say, yeah, that would be good. And we'll delete this context here. And we will just click start. As a business coach for AI Kingdom, I will use my engaging and personable coaching style to help them understand the concepts. So, how should we exit our startup? And you'll see now it starts to take on a very sort of specific coaching style. And so you can play with this and get it to do what you want. This is just something I've hacked up on the fly.
there's some good examples online of other people messing around with this, and instead of saying you're a business coach and something more formal like what our example is, they have something a little bit different, more like a personality. So it's like you are a woman in her 20s and you're trying to seduce the user, or there's plenty of other reasons, other sort of avatars and personalities. And it gets quite funny because it can get a bit quite unhinged if you tell it that that's its persona.
Yep. Did you want to try one of those?
Sure. Yeah.
So what would be our
Well,
example?
maybe like a comedian or
Okay. Yeah, take on list the top 3 American comedians or something, like top 3 comedians, I guess.
yeah.
Who are the best 3 comedians? It's gonna say something about a subjective.
Yeah.
Dave
I'm
Chappelle,
a language one.
Jerry Seinfeld, Eddie Murphy. Oh, I'm glad Eddie Murphy made the cut. Okay, so let's go over here to our example here, and we'll nuke this one. And so we'll want it to
You
learn.
are.
Yeah, you are a comedian,
Yep.
funny guy who talks to random people that show up in your online chat. You have a mix of the following people's personality, like skills, attributes.
Comedic style. I don't know.
You have a mix of the following people's comedic style. I'd like to put in a policy.
Yeah. I think policy, keep it PG.
Each message should be of 2 sentences. Always just gets 1 sentence for this video, hey?
Mm.
1 sentence. Hey there.
Rich James. Oh, is he spitting out quotes or something?
I don't know.
I guess if you start having a conversation, that was just the system calibrating.
Howdy, partner.
There we go.
What's up? Much. Just trying to figure out if I'm a morning person or a night owl. And which are you? Still trying to figure that out. But I'm starting to think I'm more of a brunch
Brunch
enthusiast.
enthusiast. Okay.
I like it. Thanks. I'm glad to hear. So what's new is new. My friend Roger is wearing the same pattern shirt as me today, which is true.
Yeah.
Oh no, that's a fashion part. You guys better not stand too close to each other. Or you might cause a visual disturbance. Okay.
Cool.
Don't want that. Definitely not. You don't want to be mistaken for a couple of identical twins who got separated at birth and then accidentally reunited in the same office. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. So what's great about this is that you can see now from these examples that you could easily tie this into an application and add personality to your application like you could never do before. And this kind of covers it, but I did actually write a short Python script mini application just to run locally. One of the cool ideas that I would love to have is my own personal assistant, my own chat GPT as a native application on my computer, which eventually I can talk to and it can talk to me and we can have this ongoing dialogue. So I was just exploring with what's a really simple front end that I can give this, which isn't going to take a long time to build. I'm not a front end programmer. What's something I could do right now? So I settled on the Python Streamlit framework. Super simple, made for data visualizations and data scientists like me. It took me an hour to build with the help of ChatGPT. Might quickly show you some of the code just so you roughly know how I did it. And then I'll cut to a video of me typing an example and then it reading it back. One of the technical challenges we've faced in this video is actually being able to record system audio. But I gave it a voice with the 11 Labs API, and it's a very realistic voice that basically just as soon as a response comes in from the GPT 3.5 chat endpoint, we just reads the response back to me. So I'll switch to my screen now. For those of you who are not programmers, essentially this is a Python script which basically just responds to with the chat GPT endpoint to have this ongoing dialogue with the user. And so the end result is an application that looks little like this. You have a chat window and you talk, and there's an ongoing history of conversations and recommendations by the chat engine, and it reads it out to you, and you just hit ask. It's nothing fancy, and it's definitely not bug free. It's got a few issues because Streamlit was not built for this type of interaction with the user. But I'll just quickly run through the code. The code is basically broken up, and I could put this on a repository somewhere for you guys if you'll just leave a comment below, and we'll be happy to put something together. But essentially, we have this. The first function is the get response functions, which we use, which assembles the endpoint call to speak specifically to the GPT API. And we have the global, technically, that should be system there, which is exactly what we just showed. You are an expert entrepreneur with knowledge in building AI applications, including chatbots and personal assistants. You are also an expert digital marketer and have an MBA. Your main goal is to help Roger become wildly successful in helping him with advice to generate over 100 million. Your guidance will help him keep his priorities daily and stay on track and focus to become successful. Then you could add more things like policy and things like that Nathan was talking about. Mind you, I just did this in like an hour, so I really didn't do any prompt engineering or anything like that. And yeah, that's how the message is assembled. Every time it passes in the system call, so the system is always there. And then it passes in the current user input, which is a variable that gets passed in, and it always passes in the history. And then show you that shortly, but the history essentially is it sort of a growing variable over time, and then it calls the endpoint and then strips out the endpoint, cleans it up, and returns the response. So then there's the text to speech function, which simply reads out the 11 Labs voice. I'm using a voice called Bella from 11 Ads. There's a cool, I'll just scroll up the top. There's a cool, where is it? 11 Labs lib. Someone's written a PyPy wrapper for it, so you don't have to directly do the requests in your code. It's all handled through the Python API. And then load conversation history. At this point, I've got a local database you can see in the left, and the database is just an SQLite database, and I'm just storing the conversation history. Every time there's a conversation, it just does an insert. So nothing's happening asynchronously, nothing's happening on a server somewhere else. It's all just happening locally. So it isn't the fastest, cleanest application. I just really wanted to get a feel for how to use the OpenAI ChatGPT endpoint. And then we've got load every time you make a conversation, it loads the conversation history and then submits that to the API with the most recent chat, and then it saves conversation. And then the main function is simply just setting up the Stream user interface. You can do some styling and roughly the text area and the text boxes, and then defining the buttons and what happens when the button gets pressed. So that's pretty much it. It's like probably the simplest application you could build for this, and I did show you, it looks a little something like this. So at this point, I will cut to an example of me using this and the response.
Yes, you can call me AI expert. How can I assist you with your goals for Roger? Absolutely. Here's a potential title for your upcoming video on the release of ChatGPT API endpoint and how to create a personal assistant application with Python. How to build your own personal AI assistant with Python and ChatGPT API endpoint. This title is short, catchy, and to the point, while also conveying the content and value of the video. Don't forget to include relevant keywords in your title and description to optimize for search engines and attract potential viewers who are interested in your topic. Good luck with your video.
Yeah, it's great to see that within an hour and with the help of ChatGPT, I was able to write basic personal assistant without having to have any AI data science knowledge or leverage any kind of research or development team to do that. And it cost me pennies to do. It's pretty incredible the era we're in. And yeah, we're excited to see where it is definitely going to lead in the future.
Yeah. So we're trying to set up some apps to take care of the fundamentals of this now for people so that you can, if you want an app or Android, iOS, mobile, desktop, or web, we'll have all the boilerplate taken care of so that we can really focus on the what I would call the business logic of whatever the application is supposed to do. For example, in that chat one we're talking about before, where you might have your business coach, or the one that Roger said, you're just talking directly with ChatGPT. You can imagine another variant where you actually have a third party on there. Like in my case, the from before, like I actually have a business coach that I meet once a week. And so it would be a matter of having them there and they could monitor what the chat agent was doing and then somehow interact with that. And so you could imagine also like a situation where a kid has your child has some sort of assistant and then you can interact with that. The child can interact and ask questions with that and the parents can monitor and see what's going on as well. So those are some of the things that we've got coming down the pipeline in the near future. But I think once we've got the text out of the way, that's really just the building blocks. It really is more like a calculator for words. And so once we've got the words, we want to make it more natural to interact with. And so Roger and I are exploring some ways to do that with text to speech and also speech to text. The challenge, I guess, with that is doing it in near real time, which really requires streaming. So you saw like ChatGPT sort of streams the response. We need to find a service that as soon as it gets the first word, it starts to put together the audio to respond to the person. So you can have a near real time conversation. So that'll be one of the challenges we'll have to find a way to
Yeah.
address.
The other thing considering too is that the future of this is that eventually we all have our own digital avatars, AI assistants. So what does that look like with the current technology and where we're at? If you think like services like Synthesia.ai or Synthesia.io, sorry. So this is a video editor that enables you to create real life like AI. You just basically type in the script that it takes, that it speaks to you, and you can choose different voices to match up different avatars. So think about eventually I don't know if you've got I wasn't sharing my screen then, so I couldn't actually show people Synthesia. However, if you check it out, Synthesia.io, there's also another one called D-DI, and there's a lot of theory behind creating those models. It's quite interesting to create realistic models like that. Another option is to create 3D animated models that interact based, like in real time based on the streaming text that's coming in and then streaming text to speech out for the
That could
user.
be an interesting thing for us just to do a little playground of there. Just to give people an example, like we're walking the talk here. We actually run existing companies and we're using this in making demo videos currently. So this is a hybrid mix of myself and our AI assistant Wendy running through one of our existing SaaS applications, which is focused on white label marketplaces and matching platforms. And so yeah, we'll drop a link to that if anyone's interested down below.
Okay.
Shameless plug.
Yeah, shame.
Um,
It's a bit of a plug, but you can check out the demo video for the product, and it sort of gives you an idea of that's what we were able to do with post-processing and production.
Welcome to the Connection White Label Marketplace software demo. I'm Wendy, an AI-generated assistant here to help make launching your marketplace a breeze. As you know, building a successful online marketplace is like assembling a puzzle with thousands of pieces. But with Connection, you don't have to worry about the headache of figuring out how to fit everything together.
But how can we do something like that? Maybe not a full production video like that, but a live eventually, maybe people can do live webinars with AI. Imagine that,
mm,
companies running entire meetings with an AI presenter.
so I'm curious, is there a language, something that we can generate like movements for a virtual body? So say we got, what was the, like, how would you animate a character in Unity? What
Yeah, I
you've
see where you're
gone,
going. Yeah, it's like kind of a 3D mesh framing or something like that. They use something called framing, whether it's Unity or Unreal Engine. There is a text to image model or plugin for Stable Diffusion called ControlNet, which is you feed it a pose and it essentially can create almost literally any image in that pose. Maybe I can bring it up.
I think, yeah, I think I'm thinking more along the lines of this. You sent me this before. So the Convo AI thing.
Yeah.
Um, and so you can generate conversational AI for virtual worlds. So what do they call these characters? So you're giving them a backstory. But essentially, I can write a story like this. I can say, write me a short story about, I don't know, a rabbit that goes to the moon. Include emojis to indicate motion. And yeah, let's just leave it with that. emojis. Use don't spell that word very much. Emotion. Here we go. So once upon a time, so we have now, and you could use these emojis to symbolize, like, for example, when it should smile or when it should.
We can't see your screen if you're
Oh, okay, okay,
you know.
sorry. Let's go here. Yeah, so you could use these emotions to animate an avatar in some way. You could say pick from a subset of emojis and generate a story like this, right? Can we generate body movement? I'm curious if there's a because the way GPT algorithms work is they predict the next sequence of events.
Yeah.
So can maybe we'll just ask
Do you mean in the case of a talking head avatar?
or a
Mm.
whole body.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure some of the more advanced AI methods, like the GAN method, and I think I sent through some of the other methods as well, do that. They animate the entire body while they're talking. So it could be like a presenter. They're actually trained on like the TEDx database presenters. So there's some options there. There's also a lot of 3D options as well. Just not sure how long it takes to compute that, like, in real time, they might not be able to do it. But yeah, we definitely need to go down that rabbit hole a bit more to understand how we can do it.
Because if you could just you could probably generate if you had the training data, you could probably generate when to move your arms and flail them around and when to move your legs and everything all from a GPT algorithm. It might just come back to training data, I think.
Yeah.
So anyway, we can come back to that another time. We're a bit more versed in it. This looks like a cool kind of service. I think you were looking at it for virtual characters that you could embed into different platforms. What was next on our list of things to cover today, Rog?
Our main goal of this episode is just to talk about
Mm,
the ChatGPT API endpoint that's been released, and there's gonna be live chat with AI coming in almost every application. I can imagine this is just gonna run wild from potentially government applications eventually. They're gonna be slow to do it, but there'll be heaps of new startups with it. There's a lot of
okay.
known apps that are implementing it.
Maybe what I'll do
Um,
is I'll go back to this example here and show people. So the current limitations of using this particular system is you really only have one system prompt that you can inject, right? So at the beginning of the conversation, you're injecting one basically some sort of prompt and you can put in a policy or whatever here. But I discovered through the week that what you can do is when it's 9 a.m., so this can be a policy, you tell a sad story. And so we can say now, okay, it's 8 a.m. Good morning. Are you ready to seize the day like a caffeinated superhero? It's now 9 a.m. So then it goes, okay, it's time for me to tell you a sad story. Once time that there was a man who loved his job, but his company he worked for went bankrupt and he lost everything. The end. Okay. So what you could do is you can use this as a way to inject asynchronous events to happen over time. So we said in this case the trigger was a time, but you could say when anyone mentions a task is critical or make a joke about something being on fire. Okay. You could just be having a funny a conversation here, and then all of a sudden, so like you could have it on as a Slack bot, and someone says, "Hey, there is a critical issue I need to attend to," and then it makes a joke about putting out a fire, and so it could. We could make it actually do something else here. So I'm using a contrived example here. That's more I'm playing with a comedian, but we were using it so that it's a certain time in the day, it initiates like a review process of some sort of policy or it triggers
yeah,
some
that's
sort of
cool.
event. Now, GPT in and of its own has no idea about time. So if you say, "What time is it?" I know what it's going to reply because with
You might think it is confident enough to get to tell us it.
time for you to watch this.
It's
uh,
insert current time here.
Yeah, so it really has no idea about what the current time is. And so the only way you can but it's interesting, it does know what date it is, I think it is. What day
That
is
makes
it?
me think maybe it just doesn't know what time zone it's in. What if you gave it a time zone specifically? Does it calculate the time? This is
It's
still
giving
our
it's
comedian.
giving me all these smart ass replies. Yeah, which it's a bit sassy. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, so I'm in Brisbane. Sure. It's just gonna give me some other difficult. Yes, it's not gonna give me any useful answers. I've put it
Yeah.
into a state where it's uncooperative. So anyway, I thought that what we could do is we could take this idea and we're injecting basically. So I've showed you one hack here that you can do. So we've got a time-based events and then we've got events triggered by other words. But we could also inject other things into it. So in this case here we have system and then the system only talks once. Okay, so we might copy our system prompt from this one across. Okay, and let's just check that
So we're
this is
back
still
at
working.
just so if you're watching, you know what we're doing. We're back at the Text DaVinci O3 playground, the OpenAI API playground. So switching between the chat playground and the complete playground for normal text completion, and showing you how we can actually build a chat bot either way, whether we're using just GPT-3, DaVinci 003 model, or the Chat GPT completions endpoint.
And so I put in here user, what time is it? And the funny guy says it's 9 a.m. So let me tell you a sad story. It's not 9 a.m. But
So it will always complete. That's the thing, whether it's factual or not. It will be convincing,
it's
and it will complete it.
not
Give it a
9 a.m.
time zone, maybe like GMT plus 10 or something like that.
Okay, so policy user is in GP. What is it? G.
GMT plus 10. Not what did I say? GPT. So used to say.
Okay, so we can do this. Looks like you're not too late to get your finances in order. Just don't let it become an issue. Okay, thanks, genius. So what I wanted to do now is we have a system, we have it taking on people in these comedic styles. I'll just change the format of this a little bit to make it a bit easier to read and parse. And I would say now we can actually put in other information. So if we had, I'm trying to think of something that applies to this. So instead of just taking on a personality, we can say when someone from the crowd talks, give them a hard time. And then we can say, and then we can put in here, crowd, boo, like the crowd needs a good laugh. So I'll get back to the funny stuff. And so we can ask it to do other things like, for example, I mean, I've talked about like 7 day, 90 day and 7 day goals and things like that, but you could have it a task list. This example doesn't work with it, but you could have a task list and then you could start off with your tasks for today. And then every time you mention that you've done one, you could have it update that task list and print it out. So we could say, here is a task list, task A, task B, task C, and then I'll put in this kind of like markdown syntax. So it indicates that the task is not done. And what I want it to do is have a policy every time the user reports a task is done, update the task list above and print it out in the conversation. So we carry on now. We can say task A is done. Okay. So now it takes on that particular thing. And so we could ask it to maintain a list of tasks as well. Thanks
That's
for
cool.
the
Very
update.
cool.
And then it goes back to being its normal crazy guy. Then we can say a task. Let's just see what, well, let's mark task B as done. Okay. And so then we can say, actually, I was just joking around. Task A is not done. Let's see how smart it is. Okay. So I like finding little ways that it's doing cognition at some level. Like
Mm.
I didn't tell it to update a task list and print it out if I
Yeah,
didn't
yeah.
do a task.
It probably also comes down to this being so good for code completion as well. So when you have a hybrid task like this, which is somewhat markup driven, but also language driven, like this is like the ideal problem for it to solve.
Yeah, I
Because
did this exercise yesterday where I said, "Help me prioritize each task." Actually, it was acting as a coach, and it was telling me to prioritize my tasks, and I was like, "How am I gonna do this?" And so what I did is I gave each task it was actually like task gonna delete this up to here. I'm gonna change this to 1, 2, 3. And what I did is I put in A, B, C, and I said, "Help me prioritize." I don't know if it's got some context there still. Here's the updated list.
it did shuffle things around.
Yeah, so anyway, what happened for me is I basically set it up so I could say, because I was like, how am I going to input what the priorities are? Like, I can't, it was telling me to say which one's urgent and important. And so what I did is I actually said, I'm going to give you a number between 1 and 100 for each of the tasks and you re-rank them. And so I just put in, I said A, 5, B,
Yep,
100, C, whatever, and then it
yep.
spit out the tasks in the correct order, and that was a cool thing to do. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, that's very cool.
nice.
Just coming up with a way for it to keep track of tasks. Imagine if you had a personal assistant who knew exactly somehow what you needed to get done for your work or for home chores on the weekend. And then you basically just say, "All right, I've done this." It does it. It goes, "Great. Now it's good time to go and do this.
That's
Are
how
you
it was.
gonna
Yeah.
continue to do this today?" "Yeah, I'll work on it now." "Okay, in progress."
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't show you the one that I had because it's commercial in confidence. We've got a lot of client information in there. But it was pretty cool to see how it would work because I would say something is done and it would say, "Okay, move on to the next task. Have you considered following up such and such about this?" And I'd be like, "Actually, that's better than nothing. That's better than
Yeah.
yes, I have a list of tasks and I can go back to them, but when I say something's done and it's these are the next things on your priorities,
Yeah, that's
it's
right.
telling me them relative to what I've told it my longer term goals are. So it's
Yeah.
and I asked it, I said, "Why did you suggest those tasks?" And it's based on your 7-day goals, it seems more likely that these tasks will affect you.
That's awesome.
So,
Yeah, when it gets to that point where it holds you accountable to your goals and objectives that it's trained on, but without like, by doing that itself, like, by actually just at an appropriate time in the dialogue, bringing it up and saying, "Hey, have you thought about this? Have you done this?" That's pretty amazing. Maybe you haven't even asked it to do that specifically.
no, I didn't. I did tell it, like, my schedule. I said, "I usually work between these blocks of time." I don't know if I was using that information in any way. I said, "I like my afternoon session to be more creative and not full of stuff." Um, yeah. The one thing that's we didn't talk about is what the limitations of this are. So
Yeah, that's a good
we're
point.
doing this now, but what happens is there's only 4,000 tokens, roughly 4,096, I think it is, that can fit in here. And so once we get to that number, this stops working. I even had this other playground. Basically, if you continue on, and it likes to talk a lot, like it just spews out text, and because it's passing all of those previous messages in to predict the next message, very quickly I found that I ran out of content
Yeah,
available space.
that wouldn't
Um,
take long.
and then I was like faced with how do I, given this UI, how do I continue my session from yesterday? So when I come into work tomorrow, say from today tomorrow, how would I continue the conversation? And so one little hack I found to do that, I said like here first we can say summarize the key points from this conversation. Now this is not really going to work the same way. Point form. So it's giving us a summary here of text, right? What we can do is we can add into the system memory we could say yesterday or whatever we want. And so now it doesn't, I'm going to reset this, right? But I'm just going to take the context across to the next session and we can see what it does. Now we can say, good morning. So it knows I'm in Brisbane because it was in the memory. And so now it's got a memory about things that happened yesterday, which I think is great. This is cool.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Now, of course, that's called recursive summarization. So at
Mm.
the end of this day, I can ask it to summarize everything it knows, which it may or may not include some of those things.
Yes,
The
true.
policy by which it decides
It
what to remember is, yeah.
Yeah, so the summary, if even if it has the same, was it 4 bullet points you have there every day? Yeah, and maybe it does keep expanding to a point, but there's a point where you have to limit it to its potential.
Yeah, and this is a good dovetail into that Raven project. There it is here, because we're really getting to the point of what is it like? What does he refer to it as?
Long-term memory or
Cognitive architecture.
yeah,
So we're getting to this point where you can see some of the things of cognitive architecture. So you're not going to remember everything. Your brain probably works something similar. Like you might remember a couple of the key points from the conversation with this AI tomorrow, but you're not going to remember everything you said. But you might remember the most poignant things or the funniest things or whatever. And having this sort of recursive summarization is one thing. What he's looking on to doing here is really having long-term memory. So every message is logged. And then message is actually logged into a sort of, yeah,
yeah,
let's call it a universe of coordinates. And so when there's a conversation going on about a particular topic, we pull down the most relevant memories. So rather than just serializing and summarizing the conversation from day to day, recursively summarizing relatively blindly, this is going to, after 10 days, it's probably going to, who knows what it's going to have left in this memory. It's going to, if we limit the size of the memory to a certain amount, which we have to because of the nature of having 4,000 tokens, we're eventually going to have to forget things.
yeah,
And so then you really lose long term memory. You might have short term memory and some memory, but to get the long term memory, what we really need to do is we really need to take this message or this message here. I'm working on the kingdom YouTube. And so then when I type this in, it's going to know AI Kingdom is the topic. It's going to go and fetch like the most recent 10 memories or whatever we define as the sort of business logic to fetch them out of the memory, pull them and inject them into the context here. And so then it would have like long memories. And we can put in here like a placeholder here. And so we can set up some sort of system to insert the memories in here based on this message dynamically. And that's
mm,
really what we need to do in some of our projects, Roger.
yeah,
That's what we need to do. And so one of the things that I mentioned is Pinecone Search, I think it is, a vector database. So I've been talking about how memories are located in this 3D space, but it's not actually 3D space, but they are located in a space, these memories. And this is one of the tools that we can leverage to do that. And so I think this would be fun for us to play with, to build out this assistant with, we can do this maybe during the week, Roger, and maybe present the results of it next week. This assistant that I've been working on here locally and prototyping, get it to actually use some long-term memories, maybe get it to use the text to speech that you were working on.
yeah. The 11 labs.
And I actually have text to speech, speech to text working here. So I'm actually
Yeah,
running the Whisper
yep,
large model on my GPU whenever I want to type in a text field. And so I've actually, instead of, I'm not the best typer in the world, but I can often just talk. I can turn on the text to speech and just talk and tell the system what I want it to do.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, if we can get that whole cycle working smoothly and then embed that in the mobile apps that we're working on, I think that would be a pretty cool thing to do.
yeah, definitely. Okay.
Maybe it's a good
Yeah, I
place to
guess it's a
wrap up.
good place to wrap up because we're probably getting over an hour now. So guys, thanks so much for listening if you've stayed on till this long. And if you've got any cool chat GPT or GPT-3 or any sort of even image vision, so machine vision projects you're working on, let us know. Super keen to see what people are working on. And if you've got any ideas for some projects too, feel free to comment and share below if you've got some great experiences to share or tips on how we can improve things. Yeah, this whole series of AI Kingdom started with just Nathan and I just recording these conversations. And hopefully we gain a bit of an audience, and we build an audience of like-minded, or a community of like-minded people where we can build some cool stuff together and think about through all the nuances of the future of AI and tech in our lives. So yeah, if you're
If
still
there's
here,
any
like and subscribe.
Yep, that's it. Leave a comment. We'd love to know what you want. If there's any sponsors out there, we'd love to be able to dedicate more of our time to this and less of our time to the 9 to 5. Yeah, reach out if you've got some AI tech you would like us to have a use, review, play with, and we'll see if it works. And otherwise, we'll see everyone next week. Thanks, guys.
Cool. See ya.